Hi all, my name is David Fuchsa. This is the start of a tutorial for Endless Space and its add-on Disharmony. I'm going to assume that for people who are viewing this, that you've just bought the Endless Space game along with its add-on Disharmony. If by chance you already own Endless Space and you recently bought Disharmony and now you're viewing this tutorial, there's a couple things you may be able to take away from this tutorial, but for the most part you can probably play with the expansion without having to view this tutorial, or any other tutorial for that matter. There's a couple things different about the add-on from the original game, but it's more or less a lot of the same. At the time of this tutorial, I'll note that recently there's an add-on introduced that introduced the Vultures faction. The Vultures faction is only available if you own Endless Space and its add-on Disharmony, along with the founder pack of Dungeon of the Endless. Dungeon of the Endless is a new game that they're currently planning to release. It's in early access right now on Steam. If you buy the founder pack, it's $15 American, and you obviously get the game and early access to it. But for those who probably don't want that, you can't really play the Vultures, obviously. I'll note then, if you include the Vultures, there's a total of 12 factions that you can play, and each of these factions play in a very diverse and different way. There's a few that you probably should avoid if you're new to the game, but at the same time, there's also many that can work very well for you. I'll state that at the start, for a new person, the Amoeba are a fairly good choice to jump into if you're new to the game. So are the Sheridan, the Sophons, and United Empire. So there is 4 factions that you can possibly jump into if you're new. I won't say that you can't play with, say the other factions. I'll note that my first one was with the automatons up here, but for the most part, there's a couple of things that may or may not make those factions a little bit difficult for you. And some of these factions, for example, the Cravers and the Harmony, can be really difficult if you're really new to the game. Anyhow, I'll note that if you look at the wiki, that you can get a nice rundown of what makes all these factions different, and what traits they have and what traits they don't have. You also get a nice little summary about them as well. Now, here's something for those people who recently bought the add-on for Disharmony. One thing to note that's very different from the original game is that ships are different for each of the factions. In the original game, all the ships are basically the same. You have like your Corvettes for the Hissho or the United Empire, which always had negative 25% support module, Agent Repair Scout. In Disharmony, when it's added on, each of the factions have differences to them. So if you look down here, you'll see that basically the Amoeba have a lot of bonuses to ships that have like shields on them. So you have like, say, negative 30% to shields, which block beam weapons, negative 30% to flak on destroyers, which block missiles, and so on. If you look down here to Pilgrims, they have bonuses that let them put like cheaper engines and scouts on scout modules on all their ships. And then, each of these factions have their own little bonuses that sort of way. So one thing to note from the original list, the Amoeba can be really good like a defensive type of player, and because of all their defensive type of traits, so they can play quite well. The Sheridan, they have a nice little mix of everything. So do the United Empire, in a kind of a different way. They sort of have cheaper ships to go with their bonuses. The Sophons, they're a little bit different in that they have negatives to some of their modules. But if you play the ships right, if you ignore putting defense on a cruiser, or if you ignore putting weapons so much on a battleship, you can still play these with this faction quite well. One last thing to note before I exit the wiki, there's also a nice little expansive detailed description of what the game settings can do, specifically about the difficulty for your game. Much like in Civilization 5, there's multiple difficulties you can go for. I would suggest you start off in normal, but you can always bump it down to easy or new if you have a lot of trouble in this game. Each of these difficulties, what they do is they make it harder for you to play or easier for the CPU to play. So as you can see from here, on normal, the CPUs have a 10% defense bonus, while on normal you would have, say, a times 5 expansion disapproval bonus. And this can impact how you play your game, as well as make it a lot easier for the CPU. There's also a couple things. On game speed, you can play slow, normal, fast, which basically affects the amount of turns in the game and how fast the game will be played. I'm going to be playing normal, but for the most part, if you were to play a slow game, it basically would multiply the cost of like stuff, and in fast it basically reduced the cost. And basically stuff would take longer to build or shorter to build depending on the length of the game speed that you're going for. Anyhow, at this point, let's jump into the game, and I'll like show you around. Just starting off with a faction. It'll be United Empire, just so you know, and we'll just get into how to start playing this game.